Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And if you're at that place where you're tired of doing all the sales yourself, yet you're not really certain how do you bring on those first salespeople, well, you don't want to miss today's episode of the Author to Authority podcast. Want to welcome Bryan Charleau. Hopefully I said that correctly. He is a Concordia University graduate. He has 10 plus years of sales experience. He's a former university athlete. He currently works full-time in sales and is the author of the book Pitching Sales, A Complete Guide to Becoming a Sales Professional. Excuse me, you guys. I've had a really bad cold, so trying not to cough here. This book takes a unique perspective on sales, providing mentorship and guiding the reader through how to prepare and build foundational skills to become a sales professional rather than techniques and methods on selling itself. Welcome to the show, Bryan.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Kim.
And we are going to talk about your book later on in the show. But, you know, one of the first things when I looked at your profile, because audience, I keep telling you this, if you're a podcast host looking for guests, or if you're guests looking for podcasts, Podmatch is a great place. I'll always say that Podmatch is a great place. But when I looked at Bryan's profile, I was thinking, man, that's exactly where I'm at right now. Maybe I should have him on the show because then I can learn something about it. But, you know, when you're in that position of not knowing when is it time to bring on that first salesperson. So I would love just give us a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll dive into it.
Well, yeah, we can go a number of different directions, but what you're talking about is something every company entrepreneur faces. If they've progressed, properly throughout their business experience. And it's a really difficult decision to make because for a couple of reasons. One, your company, your entrepreneurship is your baby, right? It's something that you've seen from the infancy stage, and you've done all the work, and your fingerprints are all over this company, and you start to realize that it's becoming a little bit overwhelming. And deciding to bring somebody into that kind of circle of your own can be tough because for a number of different reasons. And the first one being you're letting go some of the control of that customer experience, that they're seeing somebody else first, hearing somebody else first. Your company is being described through somebody else's words. And that can sometimes cause a disconnect with these new people that are, especially if they are new to business and they don't have that experience, because it's really tough sometimes to bring on an experienced salesperson into a smaller company because they either have a different expectation, payment could be different, structures could be different than they're used to if they're from big corporations or companies. So yeah, it's a very difficult spot to find yourself in, and it's a delicate balance between your expectations and their expectations, and bringing them in and working together. And it can be frustrating, but it can also be very rewarding if you do pull it off properly.
Well, you just described my situation to a T. I think one of the things you said there, the control, right? Mm-hmm. And I know with my company, RTI Publishing, we only work with very specific people. Like, we have a narrow niche of people that we work with. And, and so one of the things I've thought of is the fact that, I want to bring on a salesperson, but the salesperson has to understand that, final approval for every client or customer goes through me, because there's only a specific group of people that we work with. And I'm not willing at this point to go outside the bounds of that, because that's what makes RTI Publishing special.
Right. Yeah. And that's the hardest part, because again, that new salesperson, that new person within your company, is that first contact with your customer, and they're describing the values and thoughts and trying to vet this potential customer the same way you would. and it's a different person, and you're always in your mind, is that person representing myself, my company, themselves to the standard that I would if I was out there? And then you start to see the results, and you kind of get an idea if that's happening or not. But it's tough, because that's all of a sudden you've tried to get this person to free up time for yourself to do other things, either within the company, or at least maybe give yourself some free time for the first time in a long time. And all you can think about is if your company is being represented properly out on the streets by somebody else. And that's a slow process of letting go of that control and trusting your salesperson, because without that trust, neither of you are going to be having a good time from that standpoint. And that can really fray the relationship a little bit if you don't give them that trust and control for themselves.
So just before we came on the show, we were talking about expectations. And so let's dive into that, because I think, what you were saying to me really resonated, because when I was thinking a couple of years ago, I thought I'll bring on my first salesperson. And my expectations was that this salesperson was going to do exactly what I do: go out, network, generate leads, convert leads, do the whole sales process. And, then I just come in at the end for final approval. And then when, I started talking to some different people and some experts, they're like, that's not how it works. You have to generate all the leads. And I'm thinking, okay, if I have to generate all the leads, which I'm doing in the first place, and because I generate really good leads, it only takes me one phone call to close them. Why would I hire a salesperson when I've already done 95% of the work and then pay them a hefty percentage? Like, it just did not seem to make sense to me.
You're thinking it ends up, the expectations being completely backwards to what you were thinking, because you feel like you're doing that work for them. And I don't think you're wrong in terms of your expectations. And being the owner, I guess the good part is you get to anchor that expectation of what that salesperson should be expecting. Unfortunately, there's different levels of salespeople out here. There were different levels of expertise and different backgrounds in terms of industries they've worked in, different sales. There's so many different types of selling that some people forget about too, if they haven't been through a number of different industries, whether it be cold calling, whether it be door-to-door knocking, whether it be working virtually through social media, through all these types of different ways to creating leads, or if it's actually going out and identifying specific clientele, kind of like what you're talking about, where you're almost bonding a relationship with them as you vet to see if they're part of that, which is a bit of a slower process because it's more niche and a kind of it could be a longer sales cycle as you kind of get to know each other. Whereas cold calls can be just boom, boom, phone call, or just blasting out emails, hitting up people's social medias, LinkedIn, things like that. Like, there's so many in today's day and age compared to when people might have started 10, 15 years ago. You're going to get a very different idea. Some salespeople literally sell without talking to people. They like verbally, like they're messaging people. They're like, think of how recruiters can work, where it's just LinkedIn messages and then links to companies. Like, there's just, sales itself has changed so much in the last maybe 10 years, but specifically more in 5. There's a lot more virtual going on instead of face-to-face contact, which changes the dynamic of the relationship with the potential customer and the salesperson and the company themselves. So yes, if you're coming at it from a different expectation than the person that is brought on, there is going to be a misalignment there. And the only way you can really help fix that, if you strongly believe, first off, you have to believe in that salesperson that you bring in. Like, there just might not be a good fit for that. You think that not all salespeople are cut from the same cloth, and that's just the reality of it. And the industries are gonna differ from what they're thinking you might be, and that comes off as you explain to them the values and details of your company, and then how you want them approaching your customers. So at the beginning, you are going to have to hold the hand of your salesperson maybe more than you like, because it's not this instant, well, I got a salesperson, now I can go do what I thought I could do at the time I thought would be freed up. It's actually going to be more time on your hands for that first probably month to 3 months, more than you anticipated. And that salesperson needs that guidance to help, again, readjust that alignment so you are parallel. They need to see you interacting with their customers. They need to see how you go about doing this within your business so that they can kind of mirror those actions. They can take, they need to take verbiage from you, the way you describe your company. They need to hear it from you to a customer, and not only new customers, but the customers you're already working with. They need to sit in on meetings, whether it be off to the side, to hear how you're interacting so they can kind of mirror this and then bring it to themselves. And slowly you can kind of let them, excel off on their own. But the first 3 months is going to be twice as much work before it's less work. And that's something that's hard for business owners to comprehend at the beginning as well.
Well, when you're in the situation where you're in a solopreneur type situation, or, you've got freelancing teams and stuff like that, onboarding employees is part of your job as the owner.
Yep.
And, I have found every time I bring on a new person, sometimes it's 3 to 6 months of, being with that person, holding their hand, not doing the work for them, but, kind of being the 24/7, answer questions, deal with all the problems, the issues, show them how do you deal with all the problems and issues, especially when I bring on a new project manager. That is that's about a year a year, because they have to learn every single system in the company to be able to manage the book projects. So, that I can see that, where you need to have that expectation that you've got to show them who you are, what your company is, how does your company work, what are your expectations. And I think, that's having good conversations, right? And discussing the expectations. Now, is there a way of, interviewing people or determining before you hire them whether they're going to be a good fit or not?
That can be tough. And it all depends on your experience too. If you've never interviewed somebody beforehand for a company, if you don't have that, if you didn't come from that world, it's going to be a lot different, because everyone's, for the most part, the average person's going to be able to set their best foot forward throughout the interview process. They might embellish a few of their, key assets that they can bring. They might or understate some of the things that might hold them back. Tons of these things that only take experience to maybe flush out with better questions, better details, really finding out details. Like when you're interviewing a salesperson, the best way to get a good grasp on them is to get further details on the things that they're talking about. If they're talking about a company they worked with and what their position was, maybe asking them what a day-to-day is, some of their best successes when they were at that company, the process that they went through. Like a perfect example of what you're talking about, where you have an expectation of a new salesperson that's coming in, and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to generate the leads. A great question ahead of time would be, how are leads generated at your previous company that you were working at, and kind of get those finite details. Because if you're talking to a person that really is most likely going to be a right fit, they're going to be able to answer those details. If you're talking to someone that's maybe a bit wishy-washy, they're trying to embellish a few things that they're talking about, they're going to have difficulties getting into those details and how it worked. And they're going to try to give you more of a broad overview and kind of move you along to the next question, that they just said things that you wanted to hear, and you're like, oh, that sounds great. But really diving into those details is going to help you understand that person's experience level, maybe what you can expect from them, so you don't have that disconnect when you get going. And that's really the only way to do it. And you're just going to get better with time, and you're going to realize those mistakes. It's like anything. You're going to realize it after you maybe hire a few people that didn't work out. You're going to get better and better at that, and then hopefully find that great salesperson that's a great fit for your team.
Love it, Bryan. Love it. Audience, normally we take an ad break at this point, and we are going to sort of take an ad break. But when Bryan was talking, it reminded me of one of my really great clients, John P. Davis. He actually wrote a book, How to Hire a Sales Rep.
There you go.
And in it, he does a deep dive into the interview and how you should never hire a sales rep based on your feelings on whether you like them or not. And he actually does a deep dive into the interview process of a sales rep. So today's ad is if you want to find out more about, the exact interview process. Now, I'm sure Bryan can do a very good job, but obviously I want to give my clients a little bit of love. Yeah. So it's available on Amazon, How to Hire a Sales Rep by John P. Davis. Bryan, now you talked a little bit about asking the questions and, going deeper. And one of the thoughts I had is, when you're bringing on your first salespeople, should there be a trial period, like say a 3 to 6 month trial period where, if it's not working out, they can either leave or, you can gently let them go? Like, would that be something that you would recommend?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on what that little ad break that you had there. I feel like I'm playing from both sides of the playbook because my book mentions about how to prepare for an interview as a new salesperson coming into a company. So maybe we can have some jousting going on between how to hire a salesperson and how to get ready for interviews. So it was perfect timing for that because, if somebody reads my book going into it, they know they better be prepared about that company, about that person that's going to be interviewing them, about the product or service that the person's going to be talking about, so that they vetted the company just as the other person should be vetting the salesperson. But yeah, I thought that was a nice little touch. But yes, I do think that there should be an expectation, but that has to be upfront on the person that's interviewing and the person that's making a decision to bring on a salesperson. So that that you don't kind of just, ambush that person in 3 to 6 months and say, hey, this just isn't working out. And you can very much just let them know that there is going to be a trial period here to say, hey, you seem like a great candidate. This looks like it's going to be a great fit. Let's, work together for the first 3 months. And then let's have a meeting to discuss if this is a good fit for both of us so that we can kind of air out all of the details that we're seeing from one end to the other and really build up that trust within that 3 to 6 months to ensure that that they're open with you so that it isn't just this thing that comes to a head at that meeting. Like you really have to have good communication with that salesperson. And if it's at the beginning, just there's going to be some clashes, like because you're both new to this scenario. So you really have to gain that trust with them, that they can be open with you and the struggles and problems that they may be seeing or the expectations that aren't being met on their end, and grow from there. So it's not all just comes to a head at one meeting. But I do think that there should be an expectation to say, hey, this isn't working out, and they should be okay with that and maybe explain why and based on what you said. But you can't just kind of have this wishy-washy come on in and then in 3 to 6 months be like, well, you weren't doing this, you weren't doing that, you weren't doing this, and the person's like, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. So yes, you can do that, but it's really got to be open between the two of you, and then I think it's more than fair to have an exit if it's not working, or say, hey, you know what, this does seem to be picking up steam, we're growing and doing better in the last month or so, and then you just build up for the next 3 to 6 months.
So when it comes to bringing on that first salesperson, what should be some of the expectations in terms of their sales? Because, obviously they've got to learn your systems, they've got to learn your niche. There's a lot that they've got to learn. Now, obviously, if they've been doing it a long time, it shouldn't take them too long. But if they're newer to sales, it's going to take them longer. Mm-hmm. But, if you're providing them with leads, within the first few months, and I realize it's industry by industry, but should they should they already be producing sales in those first few months? Like, what kind of expectations are there? Because I don't want to go in thinking, okay, this person should have, sold 4 packages. And maybe that's an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, there's no right answer to this. That has to be something that you are able to see. But this is why you have to be more hands-on with them in the first 3 months to find out where it is. So the biggest thing that I stress to anybody, I stress it in my book. If there's 2 ways to look at it, as you said. So maybe I'll answer this in 2 parts. If they're an experienced salesperson, the expectation should be much higher. And I'm sure they're also going to come into it with a higher expectation when it comes to a commission structure, when it comes to a base salary, when it comes to bonuses, things like that. So if they're going to set the standard coming in and saying, hey, I have 10 plus years of experience, I've come from this industry, I've worked in this industry, there's going to be overlap, and they, you were like, wow, this person's great, they've blown me away in the interview, and you do set that bar. Make sure that you do let them know that this is going to be a bit of a trial period here, that we're going to reconvene in 3 to 6 months and see if they actually fit this grandiose idea of what they have for themselves as well. But yes, that expectation should be far more hands off. The more that you compensate this person, the less you should be having to do technically. Right. And you should be able to see that pretty quickly with that person. If they're a self-starter, if they hold themselves accountable for the work they're putting in, if they're generating their own leads and you're not holding their hand to do this, yeah, let them go earn the salary and commission that they've requested and that you've offered them. That expectation should be, I don't know what that exact number is, but just keep that in mind as a broad. So you're still going to have to work with them. They're still going to have to show them the ropes in terms of how you want them communicating, what forward-facing values you want them to be discussing with customers or potential customers about your company, all these things. That still has to be in line so that you're not, you don't meet a potential customer that they've brought in and why they're like, oh, he explained it or she explained it much different. Like that still has to be done, but you should be doing a lot less of it once they get the grasp of it and let them go do what they do best or what they should be doing best. With a new person, on the other hand, there's going to have to be a lot more hand-holding. There's going to have to be a lot slower expectation. It should be like a really slow and then start to take off. Whereas with an experienced person, it should really be a more linear type of takeoff for them. And the one thing I always stress to people that are new to sales or have very little experience and they're coming into a company for the first time, maybe they're right out of school, maybe they've changed careers, whatever. The actual sale is not the expectation when you're getting going. And that is really difficult for a new salesperson, especially if they're trying to make money for the first time, if they're eager, they want to get going, they have all this intention to be good. So, and reining them in a bit and saying, hey, the sale is not the expectation when you're getting going. Sure, it would be great, and sure, you might stumble across that perfect scenario. But if all you're thinking about is the sale and there's no in between, it's just either I get a sale or I don't, you're going to really start to get frustrated. You're going to get down on yourself and you're going to lose confidence and start having self-doubt because there's so many processes to get to the end result when you're new. And I always tell people it's kind of like a video game. When you like hit checkpoints and your time re-ups and then you try to beat the level or whatever it is. I look at the sales process like that to somebody new, where you're really just trying to get someone on the phone. You're trying to get in front of the customer. You're trying to present this like quote unquote pitch that you want to be doing and getting through that. And then that's the next checkpoint. Then you're going to start facing objections. That's your next checkpoint. Then it's going to be properly handling these objections. You got to hear an objection 5 times before you can properly really feel comfortable handling it. But to hear an objection 5 times, you have to get through the pitch 5 times. And then you're going to hear differing ones, and then they're going to start to overlap. Then you're going to answer them. You're going to keep moving up this sales process until you're getting there regularly. And now your conversion, whatever it may be, 1 for every 4, 1 for every 10, 1 for every 3, that starts to then pile up in these things. But that could take you 6 months to gather in all this tangible information from your potential customers. And the biggest thing for somebody like yourself that's hiring these people, because it can be very frustrating, you're going to lose potential customers that would actually have been a good fit. And that is really difficult because you want to capture everyone, especially when it's a niche market. But if you really want to develop a good salesperson within your company, you have to let a few of them go, or put a pin in it and come back a year later, or whatever it may be when that person. But letting go of potential customers because your new salesperson kind of flubbed it is part of bringing somebody in and growing with them. And that's really difficult. And if you can handle that with grace, and you can handle that as a learning experience, and you can both grow from that, you're going to have a way better relationship than if you start to get frustrated and being like, well, this is what I would have done, and this would have been, and how, no, you shouldn't have said that. All those things will start to eat away at that relationship. So you really have to have patience if you want to develop that person properly.
Love it, Bryan. Man, we could go really so much deeper here, but we only got about 5 to 8 minutes left, and I
could talk about this
want to
stuff
get to
all
the
day
segment
too.
that we always do on the show. And so, first of all, you kind of gave a very brief overview, but give us a little bit more in depth on your book. And then I'm going to ask you the question I ask every author who comes on the show.
All right, so I'll try to make it very Cole's notes given the time frame. Long story short, I had a lot of terrible experiences in sales coming out of university, getting my first couple of jobs. It just was not an enjoyable time. My managers were very difficult to work with. Expectations were misaligned. Everything you could think of that wasn't going well. From I was cold calling, I was miserable. And my away from work was miserable. Everything was a domino effect for me. And I actually got out of sales. I had a great opportunity, brought me back into it, a whole different experience, better management, better situation, better training, all these things. And it's led to a very fulfilling career for me that I just absolutely love and am happy to continue doing. What I realized was there's probably millions of people out there that have gone through very similar experiences. And through talking with people, they have. And they've talked about horror stories from management to training to, cold calling, just dealing with customers and all these crazy things. And I thought, what if there was a book out there that really helped get salespeople through that first 6 months to a year? Just reining them in a bit, calming them down, walking them through processes, letting them know that whatever you're feeling, every salesperson has felt. Everything you're gone through, whether if you think it's just you that's gone through it and you can't believe it, it's not just you. Every single person's gone through it. So what if I could wrap that all up in a book and help guide you through that first year till you kind of get over that proverbial hump? And then I also at the end of it set them up on, okay, now if you've got over this hump, here's what you can do next. Take it from here and go. And I can just help you for that first 6 months and prep you. Then you can be open to this wonderful career without getting, gone through the same rigors that I went through and every other person went through. So that's why I wrote it. And that's what the intention is.
Love it. Love it. All right. Are you ready, Bryan?
I think so, as best I can be.
So what was the good, the bad, and the ugly of writing, editing, and publishing that book?
Well, the bad at first is longer. So maybe I will start with that. The bad parts were feeling the imposter syndrome is real. I have never felt smaller or less educated or less like the second I hit publish. Like as much as you try to build yourself out, once you put it into the ether, your mind races continuously. And that was probably the hardest part. And I still get that. And it's been out for a little while now and I've had success. I've heard great feedback, all these things, but you still have that voice in the back of your head that you need to continually, you can't just push it aside. You have to actually face it and listen to what it's saying and work through that. And that was the biggest part. And the other hard part was too, after I wrote my first draft, I I said to myself, this is the worst book I've ever seen in my life. I literally read through it the first time and I thought, what is this that I just wrote? What did I just spend all this time on? This doesn't make any sense. There's obviously there was grammar, there was errors everywhere, run-on sentences. I was like, what is this? And through the magic of editing and working through it, I must have reread. I was sick of the book by the time I was ready to publish it, because I reread it so many times to just try to encapsulate everything I was trying to. I know you're laughing because you probably felt a number of these things. I read through it so much because I wanted it like, I knew the purpose of the book and I knew I really wanted to resonate with these people. So I wanted it to be as best as I could possibly make it, with all the information I could give them without it being too long. And by the end of it, I couldn't believe the transformation from when I first read it to the last time I read it. I was like, this is a totally different book. There was just so much extra work put in between the initial writing of it and the final product. There was more work put in there than the actual writing of it. And by the time I was done, it felt like two different books, and I was so happy with the final product. So that initial feeling compared to the last feeling, there was a long period in between, but it really felt great to have that at the end of it after knowing how I felt at the beginning. So that was difficult, but again, gratifying at the very end of it. The good side of it is just a personal feeling of accomplishment, knowing that I'm hoping that I can help people, and again, finding out later that I have helped some people through this. It doesn't matter if it's one person or a million, and I can tell you it's not a million yet, but if it's one person, that makes it worth it to begin with, and just hopefully continue that momentum from there. And also really feeling like you can open up and change the mindset of a career that sometimes gets a negative connotation to it, and helping open up people to see, like, no, this is actually a profession that's full of great people. It's not just some starter profession. This is a career that you can have. And if you really put the time and effort into it, and you start and you build it foundationally and really grow and adapt to it, it can be an unbelievable career. And that I take a lot of pride in helping to get that word out for the profession itself.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Bryan, for being on the show today. You've got time for a 1-minute final thought, and then how can people connect with you if they've enjoyed today's episode?
1-minute final thought, especially if there's people out there, really just take in the patience you need to have, especially if you are bringing on somebody new to sales, and really aligning those expectations with them, because as frustrating as it is for you, it's just as frustrating for the salesperson that is out there that felt that they can contribute to your company as well. It's very unlikely that person is just trying to come in and get a paycheck and not care about your company, especially if it's a smaller one. They are genuinely trying to help. And if you can work through that, I promise you that bringing on that person, eventually that time you spend with them will allow you more free time to focus on your business elsewhere. But just be patient with them. And because I know the feeling, they know the feeling, you probably know the feeling. It's just been a while for you. So just keep that in mind. And then in terms of where to find, like I said, you can reach out, and the book's on Amazon, it's on Audible. That's how I do my listening. So that's why it was important for me to put it on Audible to do it. And then you can go to pitchingsalesconsulting.com if you want to reach out. And then on social media, I run it myself. So just, it's me that answers all these questions. So if you do want to reach out, or if you have any questions, you speak directly to me, and I'll do everything I can to help you out. That's what I'm here for. That's why I did all of this. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you so much, Bryan. It's been such a wonderful, enjoyable conversation today. Well, audience, you know what's next. If you're already at this point and you're wondering where do you go to next, up on the screen here, if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see a thumbnail. My daughter has put it somewhere here on the screen for me, and it'll be episode 427, Selling from the Heart, with my dear clients, Larry Levine and Daryl Amy. If you're on your podcast app, you are going to be scanning back quite a bit, probably close to 80 or so episodes back. So you're going to get that finger going. But I promise you another great episode on, being a sales professional And how do you sell in a way that is authentic and true to you and allowing you to be your best self? Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you on the very next episode. Bye now.